Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about books, authors in the industry. And I'm joined with Michael Ronn, as always, and Jamie Maltman. And we have a special guest tonight, author Melissa Yuan-Innes. How's everyone doing?
Great.
Awesome.
Good. So we're first of all, welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you. It's Melissa Yuan-Innes.
Yuan-Innes. Okay. So would you like to tell a little bit about the type of stuff that you write and introduce us a little bit to your books?
Okay, sure. So my mysteries I write under the name Melissa Yi, which is easier for people to pronounce and remember. It's just Y-I, so it's just the first letters of my last names. And I write a few different mysteries, but the ones that I'm pushing right now are the Hope C medical mysteries because I'm also an emergency doctor. And as we may talk about later, I'm involved with this really cool contest with Kobo where you can download the stories for free and then make some money at it, like if you win the contest. So that's great.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. So how's everybody's week in reading been? Jamie?
It's been pretty good. I just finished the one I mentioned last week that I was reading an art copy from another Canadian writer, Brian Gutfield. It's called Gateway, and really enjoyed it. It's right up my alley in terms of it's sort of set in an alternate world patterned after Europe around the time of World War I, but there's magic involved, and it's not so much a war story. Like there's a war in the background, but it's more about some of the political stuff that's going on and a couple of the characters, and there's sort of a religious movement going on as well, and it's a really neat thing that he's done with the magic. It very much feels like historical fiction set in that period, but it's got some really neat characters and really neat plot twists and some of the coups and counter stuff that's going on, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and it's actually not coming out till October, but I'll definitely mention that in a few places because that's the kind of stuff I like to read, where it's got the real historical feel to it. And he's even got some of the chapters would lead in with things that would be like an excerpt from an encyclopedia article related to something that's coming up, or some of the stuff from the future, so looking back at these events that were part of their Great War. So it was really cool. I enjoyed it a lot. So that was Gateway. And just last night finished reading The Magician's Nephew to my son. So that was book 1 of Narnia in the books there, and it's a lot of fun. He really enjoyed it, and he's excited about heading on to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe maybe even tonight. So there you go. So that's and what else did I read? We'll talk about it in the Kobo side, but I did manage to read the 2 free short stories that are there on Kobo for Melissa's special project there. So yeah, had that as well. So that was my week in reading.
Cool. So if I'm going left to right on my screen, Melissa, how's your week in reading been?
Well, I just finished reading The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd. You guys might have heard of her from The Secret Life of Bees, but one of my book clubs had chosen her. And this book is actually a book that does take your breath away, which I didn't want to read because it's about slavery in the South, and it's very intense. And sometimes you just don't feel like reading about enslavement, right? But in this case, I thought it was extremely beautifully written and moving, and so a worthwhile read.
Cool. So you said one of your book clubs. How many book clubs are you in?
Oh, just 2.
2?
But as Michael would know, I actually had to cut short one of the book clubs to come to the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here.
Like, guys, I gotta go, so see you next time. By the way, we had read John Green this month, so the big movie, The Fault in Our Stars.
Right.
Yeah. But I actually liked Will Grayson better.
Okay. How about you, Michael?
Well, my reading week, I guess the past 2 weeks, because I wasn't here last week. I actually got a lot of reading done last week. This week, not so much. So I read the first short story in the Kobo campaign from Melissa. Thought that was fun.
Right. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, well, it was fun, and I plan on reading the second one. It just came out yesterday, so I'll get that done. And then I read, I don't know about you guys, but I was kind of lazy last week. I just decided to read some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics. I just had to let myself go, I don't know why, but I started reading the I don't know if you guys are familiar with the old series by I think Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. They rebooted it, so it's a brand new series, and it's kind of like the Turtles, kind of like you've never seen them before. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Turtles, but
is it like the old black and white?
No, it's in color. It's in color, but it's kind of got that old gritty feel. You know that the 1980s cartoons are real campy.
Yes.
You know, and then so this is kind of an homage back to how the Turtles used to be, and so they're kind of separated, and it kind of goes into this origin story with Splinter and Shredder, and I really enjoyed it for like the first few issues, and then it got weird, like really fast, like so. Like the whole Krang, I won't go into it, but Krang is just weird as heck. I never was a big Krang fan, and I just kind of stopped reading after that. So, yeah, it's weird. And then after that,
would it be good for an 8-year-old boy?
It would, except these are kind of dark. There's a couple of F words in there, and yeah, I would probably say this is more like 17 and up. Yeah, I mean, yeah, It's good, though. I like it a lot. There's a lot of action, and the story is really engaging, and I think it's pretty well written. And then after that, I'm still trying to get through Nightblade. My TBR list is kind of out of control now, and I'm going to be reading Simon Canton and Dave Higgins, right? It's Dave Higgins. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be reading Green Star Season 1 as well. So that's my last 2 weeks.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've had kind of a light. I have had a terrible week for reading. I don't know if you'd seen anything, but we had a bomb scare at work the other night, so that nice. One day out of my. I mean, that day kind of a waste of time, but and then just a busy week. So I'm still reading Lee Child's 19th Jack Reacher book, Personal. So I'm gonna finish that one before next week for sure. Still trying to get through Scott Richards' Survivors of the Shroud, not because it's a hard read or anything, I just haven't had time to get to it. And I started reading, this is the problem, right? I've already got things on the go, and then something new and shiny comes into my inbox, and I decide to start reading that all of a sudden. So I started reading Green Star Season 1 by Simon Canton and David Higgins, and I've read through the first episode today. And I'm thoroughly enjoying that. We'll report back on that more when I'm done reading it, but it's very space opera, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Galaxy Quest. It's very funny and a lot of fun, but I'll come back to that again next week. So nothing finished, but a lot on the go. Just like you, my TBR list just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So
let's move on to our topic, and we're going to talk tonight about books that take your breath away. So who wants to start?
How about our honored guest?
Sure.
What's you, Melissa?
Well, we had talked about Gillian Flynn, who had inspired the Kobo contest, and I have to say, I love writers who take you by the throat and don't let you go, but also have an amazing sense of humor. So, with those two weapons, like I think she really controls you through her books. Well, I've read two. So I read Gone Girl first, which I thought had a lot of interesting things to say about marriage and intimacy and how, we romanticize romantic love, but you're really opening yourself up to another person, and they could take advantage of you and perhaps kill you, right? and Sharp Objects, which actually I think I like even better, which was her first book. And when I describe it to people, I'm like, well, Gone Girl is like about a twisted marriage, and Sharp Objects is about a twisted family. And for both of them, for me, like a lot of people talk about the plot and how they didn't see the plot twist coming, and it just took their breath away that way. But for me, the characters and the things they say are really the killers for me.
And they're making that into a movie too, aren't they? The Gone Girl.
That's right. So the movie comes out October 3rd.
Okay.
And Sharp Objects is a TV movie.
Do you think you'll see the movie, or do you?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm not a huge movie person, but I would because I mean I'll watch it if it comes out sort of thing, because I'm a big reader instead. But I'll go see this movie.
Okay. Because sometimes I know people like to maybe steer away from the movies because it might ruin the book
Right.
somehow. But yeah.
Well, she wrote the screenplay, so hopefully she didn't ruin her own book.
Okay, so she got her hands in that process, so it will probably be true to the story she wanted to tell. That's always a good sign.
Yeah. Guess we'll see if it translates to the screen.
Yeah, it's not like World War Z where they just pay for the title. Right?
Yeah. So is Gone Girl, is it the same, is it like a continuous series, or is it different characters, like standalones?
Standalone. Yeah, they're all
Okay.
standalone.
I just figured with the branding, I thought it was like the same character because all the novels kind of have like the same cover designs, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but as you say, it's just really good branding.
Yeah.
So you know when you're looking at one of her books by kind of the overall design, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And it's interesting, too, because if you look at them, I can tell that the cover designer who's taken over for them, it's the same one who's rebranded them. But they were always very dark. The name and the title kind of small, but then one object to catch your eye. So on Sharp Objects, the original cover is a razor, which is also symbolic if you've read the book, which I don't think this is a spoiler to say she's a cutter, like she cuts words onto her skin. Yeah, Jamie looks thrilled. But it's interesting because she picks different words. Like it's not just like random crap that she's writing on. She's like it's actually interesting what she chooses to carve onto herself, or what she did when she was a teenager. And then now that whoever it is rebranded it, it's all like needles or pins or something like that, and there are a whole bunch of them, and actually spiking the title.
It's interesting. Yeah, I never noticed that. That's pretty subtle. That's pretty cool.
And Gone Girl in the new one is just a bit of blonde hair. It's not, but so the movie one, just to get all geeky about it, is Ben Affleck, and then there's like ocean and sky, and then Amy, his wife's eyes just watching above. And I found that interesting because in that book it made me think about The Great Gatsby. There's one character in there, Desi, that really reminds me of The Great Gatsby, which, by the way, is not my favorite book, but I thought that, you know the original cover of that one, that's just the skyline and these eyes?
Yeah.
And so then when we did this book, there are these eyes. And so when people bring up that book, I'm like, does that remind anyone else of The Great Gatsby? No one ever responds, but it reminds me of The Great Gatsby anyway.
Yeah, it's probably definitely not as powerful as Gillian Flynn's stuff. Gatsby.
Yeah, I mean, I found it poignant, but I couldn't relate to the characters myself.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I mean, I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest novel, like a lot of people say.
I know, the great American novel, it always wins. And I guess for me, the characters I find really emotionally distant.
Well, yeah, like what they say, the rich are different than you and me, right? So that's why.
I guess, but also, like, stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I actually wrote a little review of it. I was so angry because one of my book clubs chose it, so I had to reread it. And I was just like, I didn't like this book in high school. I don't know why you think I'm going to like it now. So I read it again, and I'm like, I still kind of hate this book. Although some of the writing was beautiful. But I just thought, what I wrote in the reviews is something like, Daisy calls herself a beautiful little fool. And I was like, if I wanted to read about beautiful little fools, I would read thegloss.com. I don't need to read The Great Gatsby. Although you can read it for free online, so that was good. I didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, that's another book that made you feel, right?
Made me feel irritated. I don't think that's
bad review. Yeah. What about you guys?
Yeah, I don't read. I read. I mean, the stuff like science fiction and that I read tends to be more. Some of it more plot-driven than character-driven, which means you may not have sort of like. It may not grab you emotionally from beginning to end, but I find, John Scalzi is a good one for me, where there's more sort of individual events that kind of grab you. So I don't know if you guys have read Fuzzy Nation.
No.
By John Scalzi. So that's a book where it's kind of light science fiction, and it's a great, action story. But there's one event right in the middle that, made my girlfriend cry. And, I had some tears in my eyes when I read it, where he does a really good job of getting you invested in, in this case, they're little fuzzy creatures that, are cute and everything. So when something terrible happens, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and you realize just how invested you are in these characters, even though maybe you thought you were just kind of enjoying a fun sci-fi romp on an alien planet. I found the same thing with his Red Shirts. Have any of you guys read that one?
No.
It's a great. I think he won maybe the Hugo, maybe one of the other awards for that. But it's a story that's set in a universe where, kind of like a Star Trek universe, where all of the red shirts on the ship realize that every time they go on away missions, they tend to come back.
Yes, it's hilarious.
And so there's a new guy on the ship, and he realizes this, and there's this kind of sort of a subgroup on the ship that they always, anytime there's an away mission coming, they all kind of scurry into corners of the ship and hide so they don't have to go. And so there's also then another story that's happening on Earth. And it's another story and I find this with Scalzi where the further you get into the story, the more involved you get. So by the end of that one, it's just an amazing ending. And so the ending of that book was just very satisfying. It was kind of made you feel, it was the perfect ending. And you can't beat one of those.
And actually, what I like about science fiction, which I also read, and fantasy too, and write as well, is that it makes you feel a sense of wonder and imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I like about it, and it's great when it can make you feel emotionally too. Like, I don't usually read analog because it's more hard science fiction, but my husband subscribes, and I don't know if any of you guys read this story. There's a short story about aliens who have dogs, like canines. And so he particularly pulled out that story, and he was like, you should read that. And how the humans reacted to it, which was like, you guys can't have dogs. We have dogs. There are dogs. And and in the end, how they ended up making peace with it. Yeah, so obviously, like, science fiction doesn't always hit you in the feels, but it can.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you just reminded me of another Scalzi that was the same kind of thing, which was Agent of the Stars, where a blob from space basically comes down and hires like a Hollywood agent to do PR for it, so it can, because it's a stinky, gelatinous blob, and so they have to find a way to introduce this disgusting alien creature to humanity, being that it's revolting and it stinks, and you were talking about dogs, it kind of takes over the body of a dog, and it's another story that it's fun and it's funny, and and then you get to the end, and it's just, again, the perfect ending that there are some feels there for sure.
Okay, I would read that.
John Scalzi. Yeah, you keep bringing him up. These stories sound interesting.
Oh, I really enjoy Scalzi. And you guys, if you're looking for sort of a, they're all good, but a really good starting place for him is the Old Man's War series. That's a fantastic series. So yeah, Scalzi just kind of naturally came to mind when I was thinking about this stuff. How about you guys?
Jamie?
Well, I guess like yourself, I tend more to the fantasy and historical side, with some sci-fi as well. And when I was trying to think of, I don't remember the last time I cried from a book. I'll cry from movies and shows and different things like that, but I just don't end up there so much in the books that I'm choosing. And same thing, I was thinking sort of some of the darker emotion side of the horror, different things. I don't tend to read on that side either. So for me, really the wonder side is a big one, but one author in just a bunch of situations that I was reading a lot, I guess a couple of years ago, that was making me feel kind of a strange feeling of it's kind of a loss of control, because that's all very much happening in kind of the supernaturally stuff that's happening in most of his stuff, but Haruki Murakami, so like 1Q84 or Kafka on the Shore, or a few of his other ones that I've read, and they'll start out in regular Earth, but then really creepy stuff will start happening, and it's just the strangeness of everything, and just them starting to lose whether they're in the regular Earth or whether they're in this other alternate Earth, or there's just the stuff that starts to happen and the stuff that they don't, that's hard to describe, but it's like that really creepy sort of a feeling. That's something that I definitely was getting in there, and you get it, like, again, I was getting invested in the characters too, and when you're feeling these sort of bad things and like out of control things that are starting to link together and happen to them, so it's like really interesting plot wise, but it's always with that really supernatural, unnatural feel to it, but without being like big magical stuff. It's just much more subtle and definitely much more creepy, and so that was one that was really coming to mind. And then, but I do tend to read for the plot and the wonder and really fun characters. I like the really fun characters, but I just don't end up feeling as much. You guys got me thinking, oh, maybe I got to seek this out and really try some on a little bit. So I'm going to jot down some notes as you guys mentioned some of the other ones.
Well, you're a Game of Thrones reader, right? So you can't afford to be too invested in any characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, fair enough. Like, without going into details there, they as soon as you do invest in a character, look out, right?
Die.
So, yeah.
You revived
fairly, or just really horrible stuff will happen to them, and then a few books later, apparently, where I'm not at it yet, then they'll die. But
I was reminded of another book too. I was thinking of Dennis Lehane. If you guys have read Gone Baby Gone or seen the movie.
No, I haven't, but I've read some of his short stories.
So that was a great story, and there's I won't get into the plot. There's a part of the story where one of the detectives in the story has to make a decision about a very young child, and it really does make you think as the reader as to kind of what decision you would make if you were put in that position. What's the right thing to do? What's the moral thing to do? And it really does. For me anyway, really came away from that book thinking like, what would I do then? I honestly don't know. Would I make the same decision as the character in the book, or would I kind of go the other way? What's the best thing for the child versus what's the right or legal thing to do? Great book, and actually a really good movie too. With I think Ben Affleck directed maybe, and Casey Affleck was the star in it, and he's really good. It's worth checking out.
Yeah, I like Dennis Lehane a lot. I need to read more of his stuff, but all the short stories I've read have just kind of taken my breath away.
Yeah, the sequel to Gone Baby Gone wasn't quite as. It happens a few years later, and it's an interesting follow-up, but not quite as good as the first one.
Yeah. Any of you guys read Deliverance? James Dickey?
James Dickey? Deliverance?
Well, it was a movie, but it was originally a book.
Okay.
Like 1976. Okay. Well, the movie is kind of creepy, and I think I haven't seen the movie, but I've heard that it kind of has the same feel as the book. But basically, it's about these guys that go on a camping trip, and it just goes horribly wrong. And yeah, there's and you probably know what I'm talking about, Patrick. There's a scene about. Yeah, there's a scene about a third of the way through the movie, or a third of the way through the book. It's a sodomy scene, and yeah, it's pretty messed up. Like it totally comes out of nowhere, and like the rest of the novel, like it's this guy who's never been in the woods before, like who doesn't know a thing about camping, learning how to be a survivor and like a hunter, and he's like hunting this guy, and this guy's hunting him, and like. Just the whole novel, I guess I remember being on edge reading the whole thing. I mean, it's just, I guess I don't know if you would call it, I guess you could call it like literary fiction, because it kind of definitely gets inside the guy's head, because like he has to learn how to kill, and like there's just, it's very psychological, I would say, and I've heard the movie is that way too, but yeah, that's definitely one that stuck with me, especially that scene. You read that, I don't think I'll ever forget that. That's just, I just remember like almost dropping the book. Like I wasn't ready for it when that paragraph comes up, or yeah, but I won't go into it. But
I just have visions of Burt Reynolds in my head now.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's get those visions out. You guys ever read Joyce Carol Oates?
It was Ned Beatty that had an unfortunate incident, but Blunt was there.
Yeah. Well, another story, and this is a short story that I read that I just remember being like messed up after I read it because it got assigned to me during a senior English class. You guys ever read Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been?
No.
By Joyce Carol Oates. Okay, it's like this. I guess it was inspired by a Bob Dylan song, but it's about this. I guess she's like 16 years old, and it's like about this girl, and she lives with her mom and her sister and her dad, and like it's like they just have this really bad relationship. So like the mom doesn't like her, sister doesn't like her, and so the parents are going to like some barbecue, and the girl decides to stay home. And when she stays home, all of a sudden this guy pulls up in her driveway named Arnold Friend, and he's like in this Volkswagen Beetle, and he's like the creepiest dude ever. And like he's trying to get her to come out so that they can copulate, or like however you do what you will with the imagery.
Okay.
Yeah, and like it's just creepy as heck. Like it's the only story I think I've ever read where I've just like had a visceral reaction to it. Like you put it down and you just don't know. I think it's just literary fiction. You just don't know what just happened. Like, but you don't know what happened, but you know that it wasn't good. So I would recommend that story if you ever have like 20 minutes. It's crazy.
That reminds me of a few other short stories too. So one of them is written by Canadian Barbara Gowdy, called "We So Seldom Look on Love," and it was also made into a movie. So I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I think it was made in the movie was called Kiss or Kissed. They had two movies come out at the same time, but it's about a necrophiliac. I guess like she only likes dead things and dead guys. And she can't love things that are alive.
That sounds familiar, actually. I think my wife was telling me about that. It was like a weird movie where she's doing all this weird stuff to like.
I never saw the movie, but the book is good. Like, and it was funny because I was reading it in medical school, like, and so we were dissecting cadavers, And I said to one of my friends who's also like extremely well read. I was like, I wonder why it was called "We So Seldom Look on Love," and she said, because she never really did she? And I thought that was a really interesting comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the darker stuff can really draw you in. Like I was thinking also about, It. For me, that's a book that gave me some pretty strong feelings of fear of the dark, maybe. I remember back when it first came out, I think a couple of my cousins were reading it, and they were, they're a little bit older than me, so back in the day they were probably in their older 20s. And they were saying, they'd be reading the book in the basement, and it was time for bed, and they did one of these, where you run up the stairs, turn on the light, go back down, turn off the light, and then back into the light, and then go turn on another light, kind of leapfrogging lights all the way upstairs because it was such a creepy book. I was like, a book can't do that, can't be that scary. And then I read it, and yeah, it is. That book really kind of creeps the heck out of you, and makes it when you're young especially. So there was some feels there for sure of terror. That's probably one of the last Stephen King books I read that had that sort of fear for me. Cujo's another good one. I think I was already a little bit scared of dogs when I read that years and years ago, and reading Cujo did not help at all.
A story that really freaked me out that, like, I don't know why it doesn't freak other people out, but, like, when I was a kid, it scared the bejesus out of me. Hansel and Gretel by Brothers Grimm.
Okay.
Like, people always, like, sanitize Brothers Grimm, but, like, if you read their stories, they're messed up. Like, they get baked in an oven, Like, I just never forget. Like, I can't imagine. I don't know. It's like some of the stuff that they wrote, like kids reading it. Like, I can see why, like, L. Frank Baum wrote Wizard of Oz in response to it. Because it was so, like, visceral, and, like, he didn't feel that kids should be reading about other kids getting killed by witches, and so he's going to write these write these stories about a girl named Dorothy and a scarecrow and a lion, and they're in this happy world of Oz, you know?
Whereas
Oz
they
isn't-
keep the witches.
Yeah, exactly.
They kill the
Or-
witches,
yeah, these
right?
witches are wicked, but they're not like eating children, you know?
They just get squished and dissolved.
Yeah, exactly.
And still creepy as heck.
Yeah. Yeah, Wizard of Oz is weird.
Did you guys ever read the fantasy and the year's best fantasy and horror? You know, mostly was edited by Terry Windling and Alan Datlow.
I
No.
haven't.
I've read some, but not in a while.
Well, I've read a lot of them, and the horror one that I remember the best was one where there was a scarecrow-like figure who was chasing you, and if anyone tried to help, it would then turn and start chasing that person. And the accused would think, oh, a scarecrow, it's like a zombie or something. You know, you can get away from it because it's slow. But it would just keep coming after you and coming after you. And, like, the car failed and they couldn't get away and it was getting closer. And then a trucker came to try and save them. And then it started going after him. And they had to decide, are they going to try and save him or are they just going to let him take the fall? Right?
This is
The
the part where
whole-
we need to turn the
I know
lights
where
off
we-
and
where
have a
this is
flashlight on our
going.
faces.
Right, and so I thought, like, you know, it's like a story like that where they're hunting the altruistic people, basically, really disturbed me. More than the real gross-out stories. Like, I had read some Stephen King and not been impressed by just, you know, people having their tongues cut in half by shears. Like, it's gross, but it's not, wasn't scary the way that this was to me.
Yeah, the blood and gut stuff is never as interesting as the more, I guess, thriller or suspense type
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, there's a huge difference between, to use a movie example, the first Alien movie, which was scary as heck, and the second
You're a
one,
kid.
which is pure, you know, alien, space marines and lots of bullets, and they're both
Yeah.
great movies. But the first one, is scary as heck compared to anything else they've done, and a great movie.
I'd almost say like the difference between what a lot of horror was until more recently in the West was a lot more of just the slasher type stuff. They've gotten back to it more, but versus some of the Japanese horror stuff and the ones that they did make where it's really creepy and like I when I was in Hong Kong I saw some with just subtitles and actually some film festivals and stuff, and some of the scariest movies I've seen have been Japanese horror movies where not Chinese horror movies, that's a totally different thing. They're usually silly, right? But Japanese horror movies. Atmospheric, the music, the stuff, but yeah.
Is that sort of like The Ring is.
Yeah, like The Ring and Grudge,
Yeah.
and the original ones of those. Like the Hollywoodized ones don't quite do it as well, although I think The Ring did a pretty good job, but it was still creepier the first time. I don't know.
Just one more book that made me feel and was shocking, and I could hardly read it. I don't know if you guys have heard of The Orenda by Joseph Boyden.
Heard of it? Yes. Haven't read it.
It's a big book in Canada. Like, you know, basically the native tribes and the missionaries coming in, and them, so natives fighting with each other, and the missionaries and everything. And again, I didn't want to read it. And I thought it was going to be too painful, and I had to. And I actually ended up reading it backwards, which I hardly ever did. I just like checked the ending to see what was going on, and then and like who survived, and then I worked my way backwards, which is a really weird way to read a book, but a powerful book and an important one. So that was also a worthwhile read. So sometimes my book club forces me to read stuff that's good.
Well, speaking of good stuff, you want to talk about your Kobo campaign?
Yes, but I don't know how to talk about it without like in a way that I want to, which is just that this is such a great opportunity for readers to win $5,000 and the world's first waterproof e-reader. So Kobo asked me to write 3 different stories, which I did, and I used my detective doctor, Hope C., who saves lives and fights crime. And they wanted to tie it into Gone Girl. And in Gone Girl, they end up leaving New York City and going to Missouri and leaving the life they knew and, losing their money and like kind of being in an alien place. And so I decided that Hope was going to take her dad fishing for his birthday. And again, like the family dynamics and that things would go wrong on this camping trip. And so if you go to the Kobo website and download these stories, they're released every 2 weeks, and there are 3 of them, and you solve the riddle in each story, then you could win.
That's cool. And what's the new waterproof Kobo? That's not the Aura. What's it called?
Yeah, it is the Aura, but instead of the Aura 2.0, it's the Aura H2O.
Okay, H2O, right.
Yeah, it's an awesome idea. I mean, when I read it, it like instantly clicked. It's like mystery stories, solve the riddles. Like I'd never seen anything like that before, and I thought it was really cool. And it's like I really wanted to read it.
Did you solve the riddle, or did she stump you?
I think I solved the first one. I think I solved it, which is funny because it's like very Canadian. Like that was the when I read the story, like I had to actually like go on Google and like research Canada.
How is it Canadian?
Which is,
like something happens in a Tim Hortons or what?
There's some of that.
You can go fishing in Tim Hortons. You never know what you're gonna catch.
Tim Hortons, Petro-Canada.
Yeah. Well, it's just
Prime Minister jokes.
Yeah, and I bet I didn't catch on to all of it, but like just the geography of it all, and I felt like like all the clues are actually in the story, which is what I thought was pretty cool too. So like it's cool because it works on so many different levels. Like you've got the story that actually works, and then you've got like the reader that comes to the story and having to figure it out. And I thought it was a really, really great idea. And I've only read the first one, so I don't know if I'll get stumped by the second one, but we'll see.
And when does that contest close?
October 10th.
October 10th. Okay.
And the contest part actually hasn't gone live yet. You can go read it and you can figure out your answers, but you can't actually submit them until the 26th, I think it was.
The 29th, yeah.
29th, yeah.
So I was curious, when you were writing the stories, did Kobo have any input on like what the riddles were, or did they just kind of leave that all up to you?
No, they did the riddles.
They did the riddles.
Yeah, I wrote the story, and then they came up with the riddles.
Oh, cool.
Oh, okay. So did you have to like do any kind of like rewriting to make sure it all matched up?
I had to tweak it a bit, but not a lot. Like they were really good about it. They have a whole creative team, the creatives, So we did like a hangout with them, and she had said like Robin, who does the marketing, she gave me the option. Do you want to be involved with creative and making the riddles? And I was like, yes, because I love that kind of thing. But like they could have just come up with anything.
And you did a series of blog articles. I think it's still ongoing, like about how. About how they asked you to do it. Do you want to share that? I thought it was a pretty cool story.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just thought it was for fun, because for me, like as a writer, it's always like, well, how did you do that? And so I just shared the email that Mark Leslie Lefebvre had sent me, and like my reaction and our texting back and forth and stuff, that sort of thing. Well, I'm glad you like it, because I think my friends are pretty sick of me talking, so it's nice that someone else is following.
Well, you said you got the email while you were at a dinner, right? And
that's right.
Like you saw it, and it's like, what the heck? This is Kobo emailing me to ask me about a book. I just thought that was cool. It's like, oh man, that would be so cool to have that moment. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah, it just makes you think of how much technology is part of your life. And as I mentioned in the blog article, I don't like to touch my phone because I use it in the emergency room, so I'm always afraid I'm going to get, I'm going to just be eating an MRSA if I'm using my phone. So unlike everybody else, I don't touch my phone very much, and I don't use it very much. It's like it's an instrument for work mainly, But on this one time, so I'm like meeting people and putting their phone numbers in, and I'm like, oh well, I'll just look at my email, and I was like, the email. And he was like, oh, Melissa, I just wanted to touch base and see if you might be interested. And I was just like, see if I might be interested. Like, there is only one answer. Like, why would you say no? So.
Yeah, and you had to write the stories and read Gone Girl and Gillian Flynn stuff pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, it ended up being, well, there was a lag, it turns out. I guess it ended up not getting the green light until like a month later. But as I thought it was, like I knew the movie was going to be released October 3rd, and they wanted the contest to end with the movie. So there was this definite deadline. If it was going to happen, it had to happen in that time. And for me, I was just like, let me at it, because I really wanted to do it. But I couldn't do anything except read, which, even though we all love reading, it's like, what am I supposed to write? Like, all I knew was that they were short stories. I didn't know what exactly it should be. And as it turned out, they gave me pretty free rein, which was really cool of them. You know, it wasn't like Hollywood where they say, no, it's got to be this, no, it's got to be that. Right. Okay, no, make sure you change this. You know, but that was probably also a time constraint thing, you know, because by the time we got the green light, it just almost had to go into production right away.
And I guess maybe we can put the link for the contest in the show notes, Patrick, but it's www.kobo.com/gone. All right, that's the link to the contest. Yeah. Okay. So anyone who's watching, be sure to check it out. It's pretty cool.
And is that contest open to everybody in the world, just in Canada?
So sadly, Canada, except for Quebec, United States, United Kingdom.
Okay.
$5,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to win 5,000 Canadian dollars because then I come out on top. Because of exchange rates. It's good stuff.
Yeah, are we on top right now? It could change by October 10th, but yeah, no, definitely.
Cool.
You know, I feel like we could all use $5,000. So, you know, my husband's like, well, not everyone gets excited about contests, and maybe they think they won't win. And I'm just like, why wouldn't you try? When was the last time you got paid $5,000 for reading short stories? Like, why wouldn't you go for it?
Stories in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, they're really fast reads, so you have nothing to lose.
Okay, well, hopefully you got some eagle-eyed readers out there who are willing to give it a try.
Yeah. Well, where can people find out about you and your books, Melissa?
Oh, I have a website, but I have a long name as well. So, melissayuaninnes.com, but so melissayuaninnes.com.
Cool. And for readers just finding out about you for the first time, because you've got a lot of books. I was on your book page today, and there's a ton of them. Where would you recommend they start?
Well, why don't you just start with the contest stories because they're free.
Okay.
And that'll be an easy introduction for you. And there are going to be 3 of them, so you can see Hope and meet her family, which you don't really get to do in the regular novels, because she's too busy fighting crime at the hospital, and her family lives in Ottawa, which is about 2 hours away from Montreal. So, but in this one, they're all camping together, so you get to meet them pretty thoroughly.
I was just going to say, too, you almost give Michael a run for his money with some of your slightly different, just looking through some of the different books you've done, like combining yoga and spies and some different things. Like,
yeah.
You've got your broccoli freedom fighters, so I think those kind of almost fit in a way. Like
that's why we're friends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like as soon as I saw that broccoli guy, I was like, well, I gotta read him. I like things. I like mashups. I like things that are different. And actually, that blog post that Michael wrote, was it yesterday? Well, I came across it yesterday about race and fiction and why I write what I write. Really hit home for me. Because, like Michael, I think I don't fit nicely into any one box. And people always tell me, well, why don't you write this? Like one of my short stories, and it turned into a novel, was about a bonobo human hybrid. His name's Sam Ian. Everyone just calls him Sam. But the scientist who created him is a black woman. And so when I was writing this story and people were reading it, they were like, I don't think you can write about apes and black people. And I was confused. I was just like, it didn't even occur to me, like, well, you should make her white because that would be less offensive. It didn't even seem to me that it would be offensive at all. Anyway, afterwards, Christine Catherine Rush, who's one of my writing mentors, was like, the fact that you divided this room and that they were saying you shouldn't be writing this is a good thing. Those are the best stories, like the ones that are polarizing. The ones that everyone's just like, it was nice, it was good, I liked it. She's like, those aren't actually good stories.
Well, it's good for readers. I mean, to bring it back to reading, I mean, the more different types of stories out there, the more readers benefit. Different perspectives and different characters and different plots. I mean, that kind of stuff is fun to read.
I agree. I guess it's also, as a writer, it's frustrating to try and find your audience, like, because you write different things and you can be kind of scattered. But, yeah, I'm all for choice and variety. So, as a reader, I am very excited to see people who try different things.
Good. Well, it's been great having you here, Melissa. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
And good luck with the. So when does the last? You said there's a third short story coming out, and when does that one come out?
I think it's September 29th.
Okay, just in time for everyone to get it read and try to figure out the last mystery.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Again, thanks so much for coming. You've been great, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good night, guys.
Happy reading.